Welcome to Dynasty Self Help, a podcast helping you self actualize in the hobby of Dynasty Fantasy Football, a show where you can learn to control yourself in an effort to better control the outcomes and enjoyment of your fantasy football experience. I'm Kyle Lapointe, downloading my thoughts to you from Fort Worth, Texas, and joining us from State College, Pennsylvania is my co host, Jeremy Schwob. How are you now?
I'm excellent.
That is fantastic. I'm so excited to hear it. Today we are completing a game of musical couch cushions. We've been trying to schedule this with our friends for about the last month. We've had some issues, and not everyone is going to be able to make it today. But Jeremy, can you tell me who is on the couch with me today?
Absolutely. So I would say that these are some of the guys that have been some of our biggest supporters here as we've kind of ramped up at Dynasty Self Help, and personally kind of one of my favorites to listen to. Even though, my listenership has dropped off on a variety of podcasts, but this is one that I keep in the rotation. So we have the guys from Dynasty Theory. So we have John Bauer at the Bauer Club and Dan Lamagna. And, he's at FF Coach Dan. Sorry, I had that written weird. Yeah, we are so excited to have you guys. Our other buddy Mitch at Dino MC is not able to join us tonight, unfortunately, but we've got the A and B member of the squad with Mitch falling off there at the end. But guys, thanks for joining us on the show tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And Dan and I, we can talk off the air about who is getting assigned the A and B label of the team here. We don't want to dive into it here on the show. But Kyle, you're outnumbered here because Dan and I, we're both in Pennsylvania as well.
Everybody's in Penn. Okay, well,
Right.
That's fine. I mean, that's a really cool place. I've had some experiences up there. Did a concrete canoe competition there when I was in college. So I haven't been there a whole lot of times in my life, but the times that I was there, highly enjoyable.
JB, you say outnumbered because we're all in PA, but my heart's in Texas with Kyle over there, man. I've been there more times than I can count. And if my wife had let me have my way, I'd be with you, Kyle.
Well, and we're tied closely too because of your college that you're at now and the college that I went to with University of Oklahoma. I know several players have made their way through the college you're at now to find their way to Oklahoma. And I'm going to derail and just ask you a little bit about that before we get into our topic here with Jeremy. But, is there a pipeline? Is this a funnel? I mean, it seemed like there were several really good players to come and help us out there.
Yeah, it kind of goes in waves, and we've had a few different funnels, depending on where Coach Duda, former NFL player, our head coach, has his relationships too. And we've been red hot with Oklahoma for a while there, had some really good ball players go there. Actually, Jeremy over there at State College has been a little bit more of a hotter pipeline now since Franklin's there at Penn State, and we've been pumping players left and right. And we have one top recruit now, Dejon Warren, who's a top 3 JUCO recruit in the country, and he's between Penn State, Georgia, and I'm forgetting the third school, but everyone from Alabama has recruited him. So we got about 5 guys in Penn State, and we've had some great ones in Oklahoma. So, I was thinking that before, Kyle, when I saw where you guys were from. And JB, we got some pressure tonight too, being on the show, man. I felt like we really had to up our game, mutual respect for your show, but we got a psychologist, doctoral student there at State College, and I've got an educational doctoral degree, but that seems mild to the psychology doctorate. And then we got the businessman engineer there in Fort Worth. So, John, I hope we're on tonight, pal.
We're gonna bring our A game. It's gonna be the best we can do here. And like we talked off the air, I don't know if you'd want to dive into Dan and our psyches really in depth, because we don't know where that's going to take us tonight.
I did enjoy some wrestling at State College pre-COVID not too long ago, and some of that delicious ice cream we have on campus there. So I had a good trip there not too long ago.
Shout out to Berkey Creamery.
Yep.
Well, as I said, we're missing Mitch tonight. And the first time that we had planned this show, we were going to be without Dan. And I had written in our original notes that unfortunately without Dan, our collective speed would have gone down by not having a guy that can go kind of step for step with Nicole Hardman. but I don't know enough about Mitch, so why don't I toss it over to you guys to let us know what you think we're missing out the most on by not having Mitch on the pod tonight.
Now, if he was on, we would hear about League of Legends, I think that's what it's called, or Game of Thrones. He's always talking about that. When he does, Dan and I, we're like a deer in the headlights. We have no idea what he's talking about. Might as well be another language. But yeah, I think Mitch brings he's a good middle person between Dan and I, because on a few recent shows, I mean, Dan and I, we've been butting heads a little bit. And I think Mitch he's that mediator. And I think he does a good job of separating us. But then every once in a while, Dan and I, we flip the script and we catch Mitch off guard. So there's an interesting dynamic. And that's definitely something that Mitch, he would be bringing to the show tonight.
Yeah, we're kind of interchangeable, Mitch and I. We both do a good job of, John, as you guys notice, is easy to rev up, get worked up, get him to have a White Claw. So we just entertain ourselves in the group chat, keeping John on his toes. And he takes it so seriously. And Mitch and I we really don't care. We just have fun all the time.
Me? Take it seriously? No, that's not me.
Never. Well, tonight our topic is going to be kind of takes on players, and we'll dig into the psychology really behind it and unpack. Certainly they're opinion based at heart. We make the decision on the players that we're going to kind of plant our flag for, and yet there's they're driven hopefully by some data, some projections. But we'll dig into kind of the psychology behind it and see kind of what's underneath, I know you guys did a hot take episode where you took requests from people and you read my Allen Robinson is the wide receiver one for this year. And was a little disappointed by the scoring on those, but I won't hold that against you. That's not the point of it, but we'll dig a little bit deeper than just who our takes are, and try and see what's lying underneath. We'll flip it over to Kyle to take you through our segment called the Hot Cushion, and then I'll take it back over, and I've created an exercise for you guys to go through. And I know that you both said that you'll kind of determine the A and B off air, but we might as well just determine who the A and B are on air. And we'll get into that. But before we jump into the topics tonight, I want to toss it over to you guys and just kind of give our listeners a little overview about what you guys do on Dynasty Theory. Just anything that you guys have. And I know that very recently, John, you said that you're releasing a new podcast, the Fantasy Football Confidential, that will be another great one to listen to. That'll be at FF_confidential. So just let the listeners know a little bit about what you guys have going on.
So for Dynasty Theory, and Dan, I'll take a crack at it and you can fill in the gaps. But so initially we kicked it off, it was Superflexology, and the primary focus, it was centered around Superflex. So this started in April of 2019, and it was Mitch and myself, and we came in thinking, okay, we don't want a podcast focused on the broad fantasy football subject itself, because there's so many fantastic podcasts. It's going to get lost in the shuffle. So then we thought, okay, Dynasty. And then you drill it down even more Superflex. So we looked at going after a niche market that has some really good pods already in there, but we wanted to be able to add to that. So then we attempted, and the key word there is attempt, a start-sit show during the season. And Dan joined us, and we had another co-host, Jordan, join us. But what we found was that by switching over to that, it kind of lost the identity of the show. And while it was Superflexology, first and foremost, it was a Dynasty show. So once Dan joined us on the Start-Sit show, that kind of, faded out through the 2019 season. And then we had talked about rebranding, and we switched networks. We ended up, right now, we're on the Ross Tucker Football Podcast Network, and we transitioned and rebranded as Dynasty Theory, because again, Superflexology, yes, Superflex focused, but we had so many people reach out to us. Oh, I would listen to the show, but I don't play Superflex. We talk about everything Dynasty focused. So the big thing that we talk about, and it's every show, but Dynasty is such a long-term game, but the short-term outcomes impact the values, probably even more so than the long term. You know, we could look at players like Juju Smith-Schuster, who many had as the wide receiver one in Dynasty after his 2018. And then he has a subpar 2019 for several reasons. Obviously, we know the quarterback issue, but now he's 10, 11, 12 in a lot of people's rankings. And then same thing with like a Cooper Kupp. So that, you know, there's players that we could see a really good 4-week stretch, but the short-term value is changed so quickly because of that. And that's something that we really focus on. And then we put a different spin on it from week to week. And we have different guests come on that might not be exactly Dynasty experts, but what they're bringing to the show, we can always tie into Dynasty. So that's something that we focus on.
Yeah, that was well said, JB. And I give John a lot of credit, guys. He's definitely the creative mind behind Dynasty Theory. And Mitch and I just slide in there and pick him up when his back's a little sore from carrying us as he's, you know, scripting up those notes every week. And we just give him a hard time. But it was really serendipitous how we got together. And later on, I'm definitely curious how, Jeremy, you and Kyle connected from that Texas to PA. You know, for me, this is just an outlet. And I coached for so many years. We talked about that Oklahoma connection and guys at Penn State. For about 18 years of my life, it was just playing, coach, and injuries got me into coach. And I had a minor league football team here in Scranton for 7 years. And I was kind of running 2 careers parallel between running that minor league organization and working at Lackawanna College. And then eventually, you know, the minor league team was an expensive hobby, and higher ed, it just took off for me. And I just pursued that full tilt. And then you get 2 kids later and a family, a coaching lifestyle is not too friendly. So I hung up that coaching whistle and I coached my little kid. And I've been playing fantasy football since, you know, the 90s, commissioned my own leagues in high school. And I never stopped. But when I let go of that minor league team and that coaching career, I was like, all right, I need that outlet now. So then I dove into fantasy football more hardcore and first met Mitch in a dynasty league. You know, back in the 90s, I had some keeper league, and then, you know, you always have the home leagues, and I love DFS. John and Mitch know that. But then when I met Mitch and I got back into Dynasty, I found the safe leagues, the Scott Fish leagues, and Mitch was just super active in the chat, built a really good rapport in that league, and it started. He's like, you're going to have five Dynasty teams by the end of the year. The end of the year came. That SOB was right. And then next year, he's like, you're going to have, you know, 10 and 20. And now I'm up to about 20 Dynasty teams. And then he connected me with John. And, you know, I saw the great work they were doing at Superflexology. So the origins of Dynasty Theory come from that Superflexology, as JB mentioned. And so I give them a lot of credit, and I'm happy to be along for the ride and just finding my niche in the industry and having fun. And the one thing I miss about coaching is competition and camaraderie. And that is like the number one things. Like, if you want to get in my psyche, that's what I love about fantasy football. I love the camaraderie with Mitch and John and meeting different gentlemen like yourself through these podcasts. I just love meeting new people every week and talking football and then seeing where it takes me. And, you know, I'm really proud of Mitch and John. We've got some long-term plans for Dynasty Theory that are in the works and that we're building long-term. I'm proud of them what they're starting with this new podcast, bringing some diversity into it, which I think is just awesome. And then, you know, I'm doing a little DFS with Justin from the Father Son Pod. We're going to do a DFS podcast that we're launching soon. And that just, I have that passion for Dynasty and passion for DFS. So that's my long-winded rant, guys, to answer your question there.
Well, that's pretty fantastic. Yeah, you had mentioned how Jeremy and I met, so I'll just kind of throw that out there. I think we both basically had the same idea at the same time. And I had started to talk with Rich. Rich and I go way back since about 2nd grade, and we've done other podcasts together. You know, one in particular about beer. That was a lot of fun. But, you know, we hadn't done anything in a while, and, you know, I had gotten really heavy into this Dynasty stuff and done a lot of research in psychology, and like it was just intriguing to me. And I read books and speed read at high levels. So, man, it's like I was pumping through, read this book, read that book, read this book, just love the mind and all that it entails. And I said, man, these two things are so related. And I called Rich excited one night and I was like, this is a thing. This is going to be a podcast. We're going to do this. I can't do it alone. I know Rich doesn't know sports like we do, and as far as like the high level of fantasy football, but he knows the podcast world, and he knows how to help us succeed and create content. And then lo and behold, I just did a little quick internet research and asked the mighty Google for something, and DLF popped up an article from Jeremy, and I was like, this guy had just wrote an article like 2 weeks ago that is exactly what we're talking about achieving here, and so I reached out to Jeremy, back and forth a few times, and basically it kind of all fell into place right there. He had already had plans to start a podcast, and it just didn't quite work out yet, and it was, like you said, it was serendipitous. It was pretty cool.
It's neat how fantasy football brings us together. I mean, Mitch is out in Utah, you guys are in Texas, and then you got the PA trio here and doing what we love. That's real cool.
And Richard up in Manhattan, so we're spread out.
And I always tell people, Mitch in Utah, even Dan being in Pennsylvania with me, the three of us have never met in person, but we talk to each other most days more than we talk to our families probably. And that is the absolute truth. And I think there's certain days my wife would like to keep it that way, because I try to talk to her about fantasy football and she's like, just please go talk to Dan and Mitch. I don't want to hear about this. But no, it really is like fantasy football. It brings so many people together that otherwise we would have never interacted with. And I think that's one of the best things about fantasy football, that and just winning money, which I do left and right, obviously.
Better be.
You will in a lot of leagues, but not in safe leagues. Number 289.
Fair enough.
I knew Kyle would bring up 289. His spreadsheets have been telling him he's the best, and we're working on those abstract things, talking to him with medication and therapy. So
it's a good thing you said 289 was the name of the league before the show, because I thought you were talking about how many dynasty teams John has. That's why he has such a good chance of winning so many.
I
won 40 leagues this year. Out of how many? 390. I mean, there's a lot.
In my show overview, I skipped over it when I was giving you guys a rundown, but I have maybe a little addiction intervention for Bauer, since he has a million dynasty startups.
It might be necessary. Then Mitch always gives me a hard time, because even as many as I have, and I had a very good run last year, but once I got to the title game in most leagues, I always offer a split. And Mitch always says that I'm playing the coward's role, if you will. He's like, no, you need to play to win the championship. Yes, but I want to minimize my risk once I get to the championship. And out of all the leagues I was in, out of all the championships, I won one championship. And at that time, I think I was in about 40 leagues and 10 championship games. I went 1 for 10. And I was like, I don't know if I should ever bring this up, but here we are. And I've built up the courage to talk about it.
This is a safe space. It doesn't mean we won't call you a coward. And I'm not surprised at all that you only won one with that mentality. So.
Oh, man.
That was a good one.
Jeez, tough crowd.
Hey, the therapy setting is not all positive. It's not to build you up. It's really to break you down and rebuild you back up in the correct manner. So.
Hey, and sometimes the truth hurts, and I'm okay with that.
As long as we're good by the end of the show. He said he's going to build this back up, John.
That's right.
Well, and we're going to talk about takes. And so I'm curious, with takes, is that TAKES or TAEKS? And what is the difference?
That's a good question. I don't know that there is a difference. I think it is beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So, I think that, I think that they mean the same thing. I think TAEKS.
Yeah, that's hard to spell.
Oh my God.
Graduate degrees are tough to earn these days.
I know. I don't need to know that, right? That's what my sister would always say. She's a nurse, and anytime you ask her a math question, she'd go, I don't need to know that. And I'd go, I
kind of might.
I want you taking care of me in the hospital. But anyway, but regardless of how you want to spell it, we're going to break down takes here and, talk about whether it's, this can apply to a projection, a depth chart projection, a, team replacement with a future draft pick, whatever it may be, you might have an opinion on what's going to happen. These might be well researched, as I mentioned before, but they are, opinion based at heart, because we're making the decisions. And, while we could just say that, we'll use Mike Clay's projections, or, we'll use our rankings identical to, DLF consensus top 200. those are too vanilla. And so, these really are what help separate us as individuals as individual analysts in the community. And so what I want to know, whether these be kind of based in opinion or projection or expectation or even hope, to help us answer what they are specifically to us, I'm going to throw out the question to each of you guys. Is a take for you more an expectation of what you think is going to happen or what you want to happen?
Here, I'll start that off, and I think that's a really good question. First of all, I love the concept of the show because so much of fantasy football is psychological. And I compare it. I used to play a lot of Texas Hold'em, a lot of poker. There were a lot of similarities in the psychological aspect of both games. And whether it's the way you draft, knowing your league mates, their trade habits, their tendencies, whatever it might be. But when it comes to takes, I feel like a lot of it's name recognition. We're still talking about players like Odell Beckham. And is he a top tier fantasy wide receiver? If his name wasn't Odell Beckham Jr., we would not be having this conversation. And then you look at his counterpart, Jarvis Landry, who has been fantastic year in and year out, but his name's Jarvis Landry, not Odell Beckham. So I think there's a lot of interesting things when it comes to takes. But what we did, so Mitch and I this offseason, we put together projections, and we have our preliminary projections in place. The revised version will be coming out, I think, later next week. But I keep saying that by putting together our projections, it gives you a really, at least as objective as we can be when looking at these players. And you brought up our Safe League 289, and one of the players that I have there is Sam Darnold. And I coming into the offseason, Sam Darnold was one of those players in super flex leagues that I was looking to acquire because I thought it was a reasonable price, whether it's an existing league or a startup. But we went through our projections, and again, it's based on inputs rather than, okay, I think he's going to have 4,000 yards, blah, blah, blah. But we looked at a lot of historical data, a lot of tendencies from offensive coordinators, coaches, quarterbacks, et cetera. But for Sam Darnold, he's coming in super low, and you can look at pace of play, the way Adam Gase uses his offense, and several things. But I think by doing projections, it allows you to be more objective rather than, and this is kind of why I brought up the name recognition, looking at a name and saying, yeah, I think I like that player. And I get into a lot of debates, and I've tried to tone it down a little bit because I am Italian, and in my family, you have to get the last word. And Dan knows that because in our group chat, if we're ever bickering, whether it's me and Mitch, me and Dan, I have to get that last word in. And it's just the way I am. Again, I'm Italian, and I'm talking with my hands a lot over here. But, I've been in a lot of debates with people about players and their projections and what I think they're going to be at. But again, it's based on input. So looking at, trying to eliminate being subjective. And then they throw out, oh, well, I feel he's going to get 80 targets. Okay, well, what are you basing that off of? And it's like, well, I just think, and we're all thinking, we're all making educated guesses, but the more information and process that we're putting into these takes, the better off we are. And I don't know if I answered your question, but that's just stuff I was thinking about. I want to throw it out there.
Before you go, Dan, the beauty of this show is that, hopefully it's a little bit of a change of pace for you guys to just kind of, well, I mean, maybe not so much for you guys because you guys are, theory based and you have these types of conversations on your show, but, it's this open platform where it doesn't have to be clean. It doesn't have to be, concise even. This is what therapy looks like. It's not clean. And a lot of times the clients come in and they, will cut themselves off and be like, I don't know if I answered your question, or maybe I can say it a different way. And it's like, no, like we want it to be raw. We want it to be whatever you're thinking, because that's what's actually happening for you.
I can't tell you how much fun I'm having right now with this because, like, my background before I got into higher ed, I provided wraparound services, served as a therapist role there, Jeremy. Mm-hmm. And I went to the schools and the homes and worked with kids. And our weekly supervision was with a psychologist. And I learned, like, so much that just, I applied to different areas of life, but never thought it would be applying to fantasy football. So definitely enjoy your take there. And it's a little therapeutic, John. After so many episodes of Dynasty Theory, I think I need this. But JB is the hot take guy, as you see there, and that's why I say he he carries the Dynasty team with the hot takes, and me, I'm more.
Whoa! What hot takes?
You are full of hot takes. You even said it there with that Italian temperament. He is never wrong, guys. Never wrong. Very rarely he's wrong. Even when he's wrong, he's not wrong. Yeah, but I pick on JB a little bit there, but it's all love.
I love how he scooted back from the mic. He didn't say something he regretted.
I had to. I have to bite my tongue constantly, so I regain my composure, and I'll forgive you, Dan. We'll talk about this off the air.
We'll see how many times I can get John to turn red tonight. We'll see.
A couple more White Claws, and he's permanently red. So.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
To your question, Jeremy, whether it's think versus want, I think it's definitely think for me. Again, I'm more of, that I'm like Coach Belichick here. I am just coach mode in here, and it's less hot take for me. I don't care about the hot takes. I'm not as like JB has a PhD in Twitter. He could tell you the hot takes and break them down. And you see the posts he's putting on there. He's between him and Mitch, they're breaking all the hot takes down. For me, I just want to sponge as much knowledge and information as I can, and that forms my hot takes. I'm less about the analytics, and I just want to be a sponge to as much information that I could consume humanly possible to make the best educated decision. It's kind of like getting the students ready to come back to college right now. And, we're learning about COVID. I've never studied so much about anything I'm not interested in as much as I have COVID. I could talk as much about that as fantasy football. So I'm just sponging content from watching the games. I love the film breakdown. I'll watch as much film as I can. And if they pass the eye test for me like they would when I was recruiting football players, there's where my take forms. And then there's a lot of people I respect in the industry, so I'm going to consume absolutely as many podcasts as I humanly possibly can during the course of the week, from when I'm brushing my teeth to riding the lawnmower to driving to work, and just forming my own opinion based on things that make sense. Is it a hot take with some backing behind it? It's like, hey, that makes sense. There's something there. And then it's formulates into my rankings where, I'm looking at them right now and I got all color coded like a fancy sheet there. And those hot takes are just highlighted, popping off my screen, and they change all the time. So my takes just come from, I guess, the coach in me. What I see, what I hear, it helps formulate my opinions.
And really quick before we move on, I want to bring up that when we did our projections, we went in not even looking. So we had everything tie out to the rankings for the season, but we didn't want to look at that until we were done. And then, okay, let's see how it turns out. And there were a lot of players that if you would have asked me 3-4 months ago, hey, John, do you like this guy? No, I don't like him. But then our projections say something completely different. And I think it's very important whenever you're doing, whether it's projection bases or just rankings themselves, to not try to fit a narrative that you're looking for. Because you could go in saying, yeah, I really like Dak Prescott. I'm going to try to fit his projection. And then obviously I used him on purpose there. But I'm not going to try to fit projections to get him to a certain level in the rankings. It's the other way around. Where are these projections landing them? And that's what it is. So I think that, eliminating the want factor is very important for both just redraft and dynasty.
Yeah, I think that timing of the take is really important, because it almost, if you're doing it more systematically as you're describing, it doesn't really become a take until afterward, after you compare it to some sort of consensus ranking, some sort of projections to where you see, oh, like I'm really high compared to what, others think, or wow, I'm a lot lower than everybody else seems to be. And then it becomes a take that you're that way. And I think that that's more kind of strategic and systematic than saying, oh, I like this guy more, I think, and so I'm going to make sure that he reflects that in my rankings, or, I give him a boost of 10 more catches or 8 more catches than, Mike Clay has him or you guys have him or something like that.
Right. And sorry, Kyle, real quick. I brought up Sam Darnold earlier, somebody that I was super high on, especially in early off-season startups, but we have him coming in quarterback 25. And again, if you would have asked me, John, where is Sam Darnold going to come in? Yeah, I think he's going to be a valuable super flex player. He's not going to be your quarterback 1 by any means, but maybe that quarterback 16 to 18 range. And then I look at how this played out, and it's nothing like that. So again, it's kind of really reiterating the fact that it's as objective as possible, or at least as objective as possible, that we can possibly be here as fantasy players, because we all have some biases. Let's be real here.
We all have bias. We all have our narratives in our brain that we present to ourselves and to our followers on Twitter and everywhere else. But
it is literally how our brains work to process and store information, is to create narratives, create stories, to make things more quickly processed, so that we see incoming information and we try and make sense of it based on the way we've organized it, and we organize it for a particular story that makes sense to us, and that is not always correct.
You guys got me thinking about things that I haven't thought about in a long time as we take this deep dive into psychology. John busts me all the time here, and we have some fun with this on the show, and sometimes it makes for good content, sometimes they just razz me, but they know I talk a lot about dysfunction. And the coach in me, especially when I coach semi-pro football, I've seen some really unique things in 7 years, whether it's, driving in on the bus into some cities where you're just hoping you come out and the tires are still on the bus, to, other semi-pro teams where, games are televised and it's just really awesome. And then it's like an all volunteer football team where, you get some talented guys, man, but there's some baggage that comes with it. And you just see all different kinds of things. So then when I watch the National Football League, and, our fantasy football guys, whether it's like Leonard Fournette, who's costing me DFS money because he decides to go on the other team's sidelines and throw some punches, or like those things just start to factor into my fantasy football psyche as we're building these dynasty rosters as GMs. And I'm thinking, all right, long term, how's this guy going to pan out? And, I think John even busts me sometimes. Like I see these guys working out, like James Conner putting in all the effort. I'm thinking, all right, you know what? This guy's serious about football. That's a good thing. I want him on my team. And it's not like the stock's like super rising because I just happen to see like a 10-second clip on Instagram, but just again, over time, formulating that opinion of football players based on what are they doing in life? Is the lifestyle healthy? Are they working out? And again, sometimes those guys that are a little bit wild, they're the best football players too. So you kind of got to balance that. A little deeper dive there.
So I love everything that you said right there. You're trying to balance the reality behind some of the analytics and some of the things that are going there. Like, these are people, right? We're playing a game where we're betting on the outcomes of people, but they're outcomes of people that are decided by other people. So they have to be put into position by a play call by someone else, yet they also have to then achieve at that once that play is called. So there's so much that goes into it that, for me, the idea of a take, it used to be, when I first started fantasy football, it was all about the emotional state of it. It was all about what I wanted to have happen because, my brain's big and I'm smarter than everybody else. And I know this guy's going to get the ball. And then they run it instead of pass it. And I'm just totally wrong. And it's taken me a lot of humility and a lot of learning of, oh man, if I get to 60% right, I'm killing it. Like, you have to really accept that being good at fantasy football means that you're going to be up there in that 60 to 65%. And maybe that's even considered great or excellent. But you get above the half the time you're right, and you're doing good. You're doing really well. So for me, it's about balancing the analytics that I use, my spreadsheets, as Jeremy mentioned earlier. I use these tools to make all of my assessments on players, balance them to scoring systems. But, my takes, I have to always think about my wants, because I know deep down I still want those things to happen, and I have to accept that they're coming in, and I have to go, that's probably not reality that CeeDee Lamb's going to get 1,500 yards this year, even though he went to OU and I love him and I followed him for a lot of years. And I know he's not going to get 1,500 yards, but I'm going to get him everywhere I can. But I have to temper and I have to move him down. He can't be wide receiver 3 for me in my dynasty rankings.
Well, an important thing for me to say is that, we look at takes and we want to say so badly, like, right or wrong in the end. And I try and get away from this in anything we do. Like, of course, we want to be accurate. We want to be as correct as possible. But in life, it's, things are on a spectrum. And so, we're doing our best. And JB has said multiple times, it's projections. It's not right and wrong. It's projections. And that's what we're trying to do. And with takes specifically, like, somebody could have, well, things change, and that's, I think, the important thing. And somebody could have a take. Everybody had some sort of take on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and did we know that Damian Williams was going to opt out? Like, no, nobody knew that, and so that changes things. Does that mean now that the people that were extremely high on CEH and had him in the top 10 before any of that happened, does that make them right? No, we need to get away from right and wrong. It means that, okay, maybe they were less worried about Damian Williams in the first year, but that doesn't make them more right. It just means that their take withstood the offseason better than another person. And sure, the person that said, I don't know if there were people that had him in outside of their top 5 or 4 or whatever, in their rookie rankings, sure, they look foolish, but and you're tempted to say like, oh, they were wrong because now he's set up to smash this year and years forward. But we need to get away from this right and wrong mentality.
There's so many things that Kyle and Jeremy, you both said, that I want to talk about. So I'm going to try to formulate this thought here because my mind is racing. Because again, I think psychology, it plays such an important role. And the first thing, Kyle, you brought up humility. And I had a tweet last night. Now, some of my best tweets are after I'm sitting out by the fire pit at night. I've had several White Claws, Trulies. I had a few shots last night. I'm not gonna lie.
There was a fire pit earlier today in the daylight.
There was, but there was coffee involved there. There were no beverages at 10:30 in the morning. Not to say I've never done that, but anyway, I digress here.
Irish coffee.
Maybe tomorrow morning after this episode.
Right. But you talk about humility, and I tweeted out last night, I said there's several things that I've learned since being involved really in the fantasy community as a content provider. And first of all, I hate using the word analyst because we're providing content. None of us, we have that inside track to be an analyst. And that just kind of drives me crazy when people talk about that. But anyway, that's completely another tangent. But you talk about humility. And I said, one of the things that I learned is you have to be humble because there's always going to be somebody that has more information. They're better at certain things when it comes to fantasy. And as long as you're humble and you're real, I think people really appreciate that. And we're never going to be right 100% of the time. I'm wrong quite often. And Dan, he never fails to remind me. but I think we have to be humble. And you see different people, whether they have a podcast, whether it's a Twitter thread. And essentially they say, Jeremy, you said everything's a spectrum, and that is completely true, especially in fantasy football. And then whenever people talk in absolutes, or they talk about things in a black and white nature, it drives me crazy. And you see certain people, this is how you have to build your dynasty team. Any other way is suboptimal. But I can tell you across my portfolio, there are teams built this way, up, down, left, right. And I've seen success in so many different ways. And I've seen failure in so many different ways too. But I just think that the things that you guys mentioned, it's so critical as fantasy football players, managers, whatever you want to call it, and then content providers. Everything's on a spectrum, and we have to have humility. I think that's key.
Yeah, and it rings so true when us as dynasty analysts, yes, I'm doing that on purpose, John, that we give that humility, and that transparency is key, because it's great to take a scoop of humble pie when you're wrong. I say wrong, and I even feel like I cringe when I say that, because it's
Right.
not about being wrong, it's about it didn't play out how we expected, and that's totally fine. And we have a little soundbite that is me saying, and that's fine.
And that's
because
okay.
Life is. It's fine.
I'm pretty competitive, definitely.
There we go. So John and Dan, is there a feeling that when you have a take that you need to stick by that? Because we've mentioned that things change, but outside of a major injury in front of somebody, or someone getting cut or something like that, where there's not this drastic change, is there this tendency to feel like we need to stay rooted to what, the guy that we believed in, or the projection that we had? And, if that is difficult for us to change, I think that's what I really want to try and explore.
I like that concept there. I think you have to trust your process. And we always talk about the process a lot. Like, you can't just have a knee-jerk reaction. Your guy has a bad game and you want to trade him, or you're off him. All that work and study and content that you believe in, it's there for a reason. It doesn't mean I'll get off it at some point. Again, as you watch the course of the season and I say the film doesn't lie, and I'm watching the player and he's not producing like that studying says, or he's not involved in the offense. I think there's times where you got to know when to get off it, but I wouldn't be in a hurry to do so. I think all the work we put in the off season, just studying fantasy football to get ready, by time season kicks off, we're pretty knowledgeable there. So for the most part, I say trust the process, and you just got to know when to bob and weave when you have to.
Dan and I are going to clearly have different answers here, because while we shouldn't be changing our process or our takes based on knee-jerk reactions, but again, Dynasty, as long-term as it is, and I will say this a million times over, a few weeks, good or bad, that really does change the perceived value. And I'm not saying we need to change our take, but that is going to change the value in whichever league you're in, most likely. Again, depending on owners and the league makeup. But I do think take lock is a dangerous drug. I actually think there's a shirt on RotoWear that says that, and I need to get it. Last time I checked, they were sold out. But it really is, and I think people are so stubborn, and the easiest example is Josh Allen. Pre-draft, people were bashing him. And then even after he landed with the Bills, he slipped in so many rookie drafts, Superflex or 2 quarterback leagues, and then startups that offseason. He's actually one of my most rostered players for that reason alone. I was getting him in second round of Superflex rookie drafts. Do I think he's a good quarterback, an actual good NFL quarterback? No. But to get people's goat, you better believe I'm going to troll every once in a while on Twitter. But he's a fantasy relevant quarterback and somebody that you can have because of the floor he provides with his rushing ability. But that's just one specific player. But I think that's an example where take lock really does come into play. And Dynasty fantasy football is, you have to be fluid. You have to be changing constantly. And one player, and this is a few years back, that I was completely off of because, he doesn't score touchdowns. And my processes were so ass backwards at that point. But it was Julio Jones. And then, reevaluating and having different data points that we should be looking at and different correlation between things. That's a player that I really changed my mind on. So I don't think that we should be afraid to change our mind on players. But just like Dan said, we shouldn't just, there's one good game. That guy went from my running back 50 to running back 7 or whatever it is. But I do think we have to be able to adjust if new information presents itself, whether it's a change in the depth chart or an injury or whatever, or information that we didn't know previously existed, because there's so much good information out there. And if there's something, looking at Cooper Kupp and the shift in 12 personnel for the Rams, well, that's going to change his value, whether it's real or perceived or both. But I do think that we have to be very fluid in the way we look at these players. And Dan's ready to punch me through the screen, I think.
The key thing you said there, John, is if there was new information we didn't have. So I will agree with John there, because it's the one thing none of us have that luxury of being, is like inside the locker room. There's that element that we will just never know. We're taking as much information as we have. But outside of that, JB, JB gets a little wishy-washy, guys, there. There's not enough conviction. John, you got to stick with your picks. I mean, we're flexible. I get it. You got to adapt and adjust. But, I mean, you can't just, hop off the bandwagon there. Like Josh Allen, that's a good example. So there was a take today that I didn't like that I retweeted about Josh Allen, where someone said, the head coach McDermott says, he's the key. And, being that all the pressure was on Josh Allen, all of a sudden this analyst said, there's like a 2-year window where he's out. Well, just because the head coach says the quarterback obviously is a big key to their success does not mean he has a 2-year window. The guy's very young. He is talented. It kind of reminded me of Tony Romo. I had the opportunity to coach a camp up in Kutztown with some of the Garrett brothers. And back right before Romo peaked, he says, he's the key to our season. We'll go as far as Romo goes. And he turned out pretty good. And one thing about Romo is he was just a real hard worker. And it's the same thing with Josh Allen. That guy's busting his tail to become a better quarterback every year. Yeah, he's not perfectly accurate. Yeah, there's some flaws in the game, but, franchise NFL quarterbacks just don't grow on a tree in the backyard there. So, yeah, I think you got to trust the process and have a little more conviction than JB. But I like your point about new information, John.
I like the fact that both of you love the quarterback that I took first in Superflex 289.
Yeah, I'm a huge Josh Allen advocate. I really am. And again, sometimes it's to the point of trolling. And I learned that from the best in the business, Mitch Sorensen. He's really honed his skills and talents. And he'll message Dan and myself early in the morning. He's like, I woke up feeling extra trolly today. And then 5 minutes later, you see a tweet. And I'm like, geez, I can't even like or retweet this. I will for the team, but it's outlandish. But yeah, Josh Allen, it really is take lock. And then the lazy analysis and comparison. Oh, I definitely see this playing out like Mitchell Trubisky. Well, the Buffalo Bills, they're building around him and putting him in a situation for that team to win. If they make the playoffs this year, I would be very shocked if we don't see an extension coming up before the fifth-year extension. I really would be surprised because winning cures a lot of things, and you guys know that. And Mitchell Trubisky, they weren't winning. Was it all his fault? No. And I do think he gets the plug pulled, whether it's to start the season or as the season progresses. And Nick Foles, cover your ears, Dan, because I know he cost you some money in DFS. But Nick Foles, he's not a great quarterback, but I think he's better than Mitchell Trubisky. But Josh Allen, yeah, if I can get a discount on him because people are worried about his longer than 2-year outlook, please sign me up.
Yeah, Jeremy, if you could off the air give me a 1-hour session on Nick Foles, I'll pay for it. I have some PTSD there.
If you look at it from Allen Robinson's perspective, that's a godsend. So we'll, you can just pretend you're Allen Robinson, and then Nick Foles is great for you.
We'll see.
For those scoring at home, that was 2 now backaways from the mic on JB while Dan was talking. So. If you're playing the drinking game that we've established tonight, take your second shot or chug your second beer.
2 shotguns of Trulies.
There you go. Right. And I do have one more point about kind of changing your opinion. And this isn't necessarily fantasy related or a take on a player, but 2 weeks ago we had an episode and we really dove into how we felt the NFL was handling everything throughout the offseason. And Dan and Mitch, they were completely on board. They thought the NFL was doing a great job. And Dan, you can attest to this. I was being quite the pessimist. And I was going on and on about different things that I didn't feel comfortable with, comparing it to Major League Baseball with the fact they don't have a bubble. But then more information has presented itself. And you now have teams like the Cowboys, the Raiders, the Bucks, and the Saints that are setting up these, faux bubbles, if you will. And then, yeah, you have teams like the Seahawks where they're sneaking women in Seattle Seahawks jerseys to the hotel. But I think if they're putting these different things in place, what was that?
I just need to know where I'm booking my ticket to.
No, but that's new information. And I was whistling a slightly different tune that this gives me some hope that we might have maybe not complete normalcy, but it gives me hope that we're going to have a 2020 season if these steps continue to take place. And I'm not going to say Dan and Mitch were right, but I definitely have come over from complete pessimism to at least right in the middle.
So you were just uninformed before that show, JB. It's not like the 800 Dynasty teams that you studied. I'm hip deep in COVID talk here. The NFL is doing a great job.
It must have been amidst another startup.
It was not uninformed because that information was not out yet. We can go look at the timestamps if you'd like.
Well, Kyle, I'm going to throw it over to you so we can change the pace a little bit. And then if we have some time at the end, we'll dig back into this.
I love this. Okay, guys, it's time for me to scoot on down to the other end of the couch so you can take my place on the hot cushion. Today, I'm going to discuss your fantasy football footprint and follow that up with some questions. Please keep in mind, I'm going to be very direct and brutally honest. So the questions are not going to necessarily be very easy. Is that okay?
I sign off on that, yes.
I second that.
Fantastic. Before we get into the meat of this potato, I would like to ask just a few things about you. Dan, what age were you when you decided sports was the way of life for you?
Man, I was probably not even 10 yet. Just grew up in a sports household there. My dad was a big sports guy. Was in my backyard pretending I was Tony Dorsett. So it started very early for me, Kyle.
That's pretty awesome. So I heard earlier Scranton was where you're laying your head down on the pillow.
The electric city.
Whereabouts do you live, JB?
I'm in Pittsburgh, so I'm on the other end of the state, the better side of the state. But yeah, I'm in Pittsburgh.
Fantastic. Yeah, so
I stay neutral in the middle.
There you go.
I had mentioned before that I had done a concrete canoe competition up there. So it was my last senior year in college where we, as civil engineers, built canoes out of concrete and raced them. And we did that while staying at Drexel University and having a good old time, man. It was, and we had a lot of fun in that city.
Hey, well, hopefully next year, Jeremy and John will be hosting you here in Scranton, PA. I made my pitch to Scott Fish.
Saw that?
Kyle, if you want to make a road trip from Texas, but we're ready to go.
There's a lot of us down here, and it sounds like, possibly the Dallas-Fort Worth Metro might be a hub. If it doesn't get chosen, I'm there. I am there.
I would be shocked if Dallas didn't get picked. Yeah, we've interacted with Ray a ton, Casey. I know they're both down there. There's a ton of people, and I'm obviously leaving out a lot, but I would be shocked if you guys didn't get one of the live draft spots.
Right. Katie Flowers is up there, north of Dallas, and then, Oklahoma Doug, he's up there not too far from North Dallas. I mean, he's basically just across the border. So, we got a lot of people, and Gary Haddow is there as well. So, quite a few people. We're loaded. But
everything's bigger in Texas. Kyle, refresh my memory. How far is Fort Worth from Dallas?
It's about 25 miles. We call it the Metroplex. So it's one gigantic metro. Really, you never leave the suburb between the two big cities.
Stockyards are in Fort Worth, correct?
Fort Worth.
That's right. So I was there right before the pandemic. We came back from the Stockyards. And that's when I was driving back to my family's house in Ulysses when I hopped on Twitter and saw Dez's tweet and ended up driving back to that gym not too far from Fort Worth there to ball it up with Dez. See, any free plug, JB. He's laughing,
You've mentioned me, Cole. You've mentioned Dez, but you haven't mentioned the third in the trifecta, Lenny.
And Uncle Lenny Fournette. It was a great game of basketball. They were just raining threes the most of the game.
Well,
I kept Dez in check.
That leads me to my third question. Dan, have you ever had an interaction with an actual NFL player that skewed your rankings or made you change how much you tried to put them onto your fantasy football teams?
Kyle, I am very guilty of everything you just said. And I think it starts with Leonard Fournette, McCole Hardman, and Dez Bryant here. I think I was in an NFC draft last week, and I took McCole. I took him instead of Alexander Madison, and I had Cook in the first round. I think that was my misstep of the draft. I should have waited one more round on McCole. So he's definitely a little higher because of that basketball game, and I'm holding out hope for Uncle Lenny, even though he's a hothead. And Dez is on the majority of my rosters, hoping he signs as a free agent. So 100%.
Love Dez. Man, he wears his heart on his sleeve. He went to the opposite college of me, the little brother of Oklahoma State, or Okie Light, as we call them. But we can't hold everything against you for your entire life. I think that's a part of what we say on the show, right? So I'm a beer guy, and I don't know about you guys because I know, John, you prefer maybe some of the seltzers, but I have to ask, do you guys have a favorite brewery?
I really like who does the monkeys, the sour monkeys and the golden monkeys?
Victory.
Yes, I really enjoy those. And I think for the most part, I will drink beer, wine, vodka, obviously the seltzers. But if I'm going to drink a beer, I prefer the higher alcohol content. And the sour and golden monkeys, they usually do the job. So that's kind of my go-to.
Nice.
I'm a lightweight compared to JB there, man, but I do like a good beer. I'm a Heineken drinker by preference. I think it's hereditary. My dad was a Heineken drinker, so that would be my beer of choice.
That's fantastic. So my final intro question, what is your favorite thing about off-season fantasy football?
For me, and this is for better or worse, there is that stretch, 9 months. You can't be wrong. Yeah, and I say for better or worse, on Twitter, you see those hot takes, and it's like you see it time after time after time. And we're at the point now sitting here in the middle of August, and they're takes that we've seen all off season. I can't take Jonathan Taylor or Clyde Edwards-Helaire anymore. I can't take, I'm trying to think of different Joe Mixon talk. That's all Twitter every day. Joe Mixon is brought up. Robert Woods is undervalued. No shit. We talk about it every day.
Ronald Jones, Keyshawn.
I can't do it.
Backfield.
And that's kind of why at this point in the offseason, I stay away from takes on Twitter, and I try to, lighten it up a little bit. It's more, somewhat entertaining. At least I think it's entertaining. I'll tweet something out and I sit there and crack up for like 10 minutes. And then a couple hours later, it gets 2 likes and I don't get it. But yeah, I think the fact that it's pure speculation, and especially with everything going on in the world right now, every little piece of information, anything that we can hold on to there, it really is, in a way, helping people get through their day with all of the crap going on in the world. So I would say the speculation and just being able to drag that take out for better or worse throughout the 9-month stretch.
This offseason has been absolutely unusual. So, to John's point, the hot takes are to nauseam at this point. It's just a different offseason. But what I enjoy and I love about the offseason, it's a little longer than I like because, just the football season's a blast. Once, you can't bet on any more DFS games, I get a little depressed. And football is my niche. I'll dabble in other stuff, but football is the only one I'm really hardcore in. But the off seasons where I think you grind and you become a better fantasy football player. That's when, okay, what did I learn from last season? What did I do wrong? We talked about that humble pie John mentioned. Where did I make my mistakes last season? How do I become better? So it's building up to that point that's about to arrive in a few weeks where we're playing again and you're feeling really confident about everything you put in and studied. The only thing we're missing this year that we're just starting to get now is training camps. Being able to really dive in and see with your own eyes who's looking good in camp, and some beat writers that normally have a real good take, that they're really reliable. You start forming some opinions, and it was like last year's grind where I formed my opinions on DJ Chark and Mark Andrews. They were my hot takes, guys that I had a lot of conviction on going into the year, and it was just that whole body of work of listening to and watching so much content that led me into the season. So this year has been a little bit different because we haven't been able to watch as much. So it's been more, okay, hey, what haven't I done in the past? JB was really helpful with a nice spreadsheet for all my dynasty teams. I'm more organized than I was ever in the past. And, to me, that's just another plus going into my game this year. Broke down all my dysfunction and what I think of all the organizations, just things I would have never done otherwise that I think are going to help going into this season.
And Dan brought up a good point to kind of follow up on that. The off season is when we really spend our time as dynasty owners. Once we get into the season, it's in season roster management, start sit decisions, but it's during the off season that we really build the foundation to win those championships, or in my case, get to the championship and try to split the pot 50-50. But, whatever the situation is, I think it's more difficult during the season. And we even see it with our show. Throughout the off season, there's certain times that our viewership and traction we get is through the roof. And then once the season hits, it kind of, stalls a little bit to an extent because people transition into more that redraft mindset. Whereas in the off season, you're making trades, you're picking up, future draft capital, planting your flags on those specific players like Dan mentioned. And then once the season comes around, that kind of takes a back seat.
I think if I could add one thing, I think this offseason was very beneficial to all of us and our podcast, because even though we didn't have a lot of fresh news, the time John and Mitch were able to spend on their projections and the time I was able to spend on my rankings and even breaking down O-line more than I've been able to in the past, I think it's helped give us some fresh content for our show and will help during the season.
Well, I like that Brian Edwards' high school coach tweeted that he reminded him of AJ Green. So now it's time for the hard-hitting analysis and drama-laden questions. Are you ready?
Bring it.
Okay, I'm going to read these cold today, so good luck. Playing for the Dallas Cowboys is an absolute privilege. Wearing the star is something that few wide receivers earn. One of the wide receivers from last year signed a 3-year contract with the Houston Texans and will not be back. Another one of the receivers signed a multi-year $100 million contract. But this other receiver led the Cowboys in yards per reception, 20-yard plays, and snaps. Who am I?
I think it's Michael Gallup right here on my wall.
I am Kyle LaPointe. I would have also accepted at Dogleg Brewer. It would have been fine to say Kyle on the couch. No, Michael Gallup was the guy I was talking about in the preface to that question, but no, unfortunate, you do not get the correct answer on question number one.
Sorry.
These are hard then, jeez.
Question number 2. I grew up playing an ever-popular card game called Euchre. In this game, the jack of the suit called trump is the boss and is called the right bower. The jack of the other suit of the same color is called the left bower and is very good but not quite as useful as the right bower. John is married, like myself, so we are all aware of who the boss is. Mitch and the left are doing projections for this year's 32 teams, but started by releasing projections for a team that no longer exists. That is truly a tough way to start. What is the best brand of hard seltzer?
Man, I've gone back and forth on this, and I really enjoy it. I'm going to say Vizzy. I really am. I've done a lot of research. I put in a lot of hard time and hours there. I'm going to go Vizzy. I think the flavor combinations, it really whets the palate. It's intriguing. Yeah, so I'm going to go Vizzy.
Checking my answers, it says there are no good brands of hard seltzer. I'm sorry.
All right, I was gonna say none of the above, but I figured this was like a John question, so.
Hey guys, this is a lot of fun. I actually have to go.
I will say, doesn't Vizzy have like the best ingredients in terms of like none of them are good for you, but I think that's like it has the least amount of like artificial preservatives and that shit.
Yeah, and there's antioxidants and vitamin C, so I feel healthy drinking it.
There you go.
I feel healthy drinking everything I drink.
I feel so healthy. I need
coffee,
another
beer. I call my coffee vitamin C. So you just mentioned that as well, but that's what we call vitamin C. All right, question number 3. It is always a problem when we work extremely hard on a computer only to have the computer crash. If we have a backup of our files, then we are okay. But sometimes even the backup isn't what you'd hoped it would be. It can also take quite some time to get back up and running after the bad news. Chumbawamba gets knocked down, but they get back up again. Play Vaughn, Keyshawn, pick round 3rd, Buccaneers, Bay, Tampa. Does position what? Rewind. Let me reverse it. Back up words like Judas Priest first did. What position does the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 3rd round pick, Keyshawn Vaughn, play?
Running back.
Don't say the bench. Please don't say the bench.
All right, we got running back, and that is correct. Backup running back, which is what he actually will be. But yes, he plays running back. Good answer. See, Dan's straight. He paid attention. He answered the question.
We've had a lot of uncertainty in Hot Cushion. That was the most tentative answer I've ever seen. It's like a running back with a question mark at the end.
I accept it. It was the right answer.
All
right.
I am Ron Burgundy.
Exactly.
Question number 4. The 4 of us began to compete against each other in Safe League's Dynasty 289 Premium, open parentheses, SF / TE end parentheses. That phrase is used loosely as the quality of drafting and overall skills of our teams vary drastically. Mitch drafted Ricky Seals-Jones, Jeremy took Darwin Thompson, and the left took Hunter Renfrow with Marvin Jones still on the board. There are many strategies that people take in startup drafts, so the 3 of you should be comforted to know that punting to win 3 years down the road is indeed one of them. Since at Dogleg Brewers' team is obviously head and shoulders above all others here, what are the odds that Kyle wins the inaugural season championship, barring COVID shutdown?
Well, based on the negativity with the seltzers, I'm going to give you a 5% chance.
Based on what you just said, those guys taking all below our own pile.
I like both of those answers, but the true percentage chance is 8.3% repeating, which is 1 out of 12, because I am 1 out of 12 teams in this league. and I have the same chances to win as everyone else. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your candid and truthful answers and my insightful and hard-hitting analysis.
I totally would have said 100%.
It's
totally wrong, but I'm in it for the points.
Right? I probably should have gone ahead and given it a half point for the 100%. Let's do it. We're going to
literally award half
1.5 points is
I'm
great.
feeling pretty good about
place all
myself
time.
right now. We have the
score.
half a point for 100%. I was gonna say none of the above for the seltzers. I just didn't know it was my question to answer there, and I guess running back. So I'll take it.
Just as I'm writing this down there, do we need to subdivide that by 2? Because
No, we just need to give JB the first ever 0 points, and Dan gets 1.5.
JB, you want my challenge flag, JB? You could use it.
No, it's not even worth it here, Dan. It's not even.
Well, good show regardless.
I think this is the time in the show where we've officially gone down to his rock bottom, and now it is time to maybe build him back up.
I like that.
I'm gonna fight. I'm a fighter here, so I'll try to build myself up.
Excellent. So I'll take the reins again, and we're gonna do our exercise that I had you guys do a little bit of preparation for before the show. So to let the listener in, before the show, I asked you both to prepare some supportive takes in a dynasty context for some number of a group of players. So I'm going to read that list in just a moment here. But you both will essentially draft these players, and these players will be the ones that you want to provide a take in support of, again, within a dynasty context. So after the draft that we do, real quickly, you'll provide 1 minute per player, brief takes on these players, again, in support. The result will be Kyle and I will be judging you on each of these arguments. So Kyle, I don't know if you have a paper and pen or a pad or something like that. I'm going to do it on my
I've got a spreadsheet.
We can use a spreadsheet as well. He loves his spreadsheets. Again, they talk to him. Anyway, let's determine that draft order, and then I will read the players. So to determine the order, there were 4 common players that Kyle and I drafted in SFBX. So we're going to just have you guys throw out names. Don't pull anything up. If you did, that's totally fine. You're at an advantage. But the first one to name one of the 4 common players gets the first selection in our little mini draft here for our takes. So the one clue is those positions were 2 running backs, 1 wide receiver, 1 tight end.
I will say Allen Robinson.
That is not correct.
Is this one of the players that were sent to us tonight, or just could be anybody?
Not exclusively. I didn't check to see if these guys are on there.
Okay.
None of them are on there.
Okay.
Ooh, man,
one of them is on there. Sorry.
Okay, you just negated 19 players, so
one of them is on there. Well, I know. I mean, the entire player pool is open. It's not. Got to give them.
This is rapid fire. Just start naming names.
Yeah, literally just start naming names. We don't have to go back and forth. This is just for first draft pick.
Ezekiel Elliott.
McCaffrey.
David Montgomery.
Aaron Jones.
Still no.
Alvin Cook.
Jamal Williams.
James Conner. Leonard Fournette. Derrick Henry.
Saquon Barkley.
Nick Chubb.
I had Derrick.
Josh Jacobs.
Cooper Kupp.
You know that one of them is on the list of players that was sent to you, so.
Johnson. Kenny Galladay.
Nope.
Blake Jarwin.
No.
Randall Cobb.
Nope.
You can just do like paper, scissors.
Cobb, though.
DeAndre Hopkins.
I'm enjoying this more than the listeners.
Michael Thomas.
Nope.
CeeDee Lamb.
You.
Not going to happen in this.
All right. So if somebody has the list of players pulled up,
Chris Godwin.
Yep. This is SFBX.
Yep. Nope.
Oh, Scott Fishbowl.
So I'll give you guys 2 clues, and it'll be kind of rapid fire from then on. So one is pretty much a consensus first to second round turn running back.
Joe Mixon.
No. The other is from the wide receiver column of the list that was sent to you.
Amari Cooper, Kenny Galladay, Juju Smith, Corey Davis, John Ross, James Washington.
Corey Davis. Okay. There we go.
Nice. Smart move.
I like how there were two options to do.
And I actually,
first round. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to defer to give Dan the first pick because I know
an interesting strategy. All right.
Because I know exactly how it's going to play out.
Okay. So before we get to the actual draft,
is this a snake draft?
It will be a snake draft. Yes.
Okay. Order built.
Okay, but just to name the four common players, they were Miles Sanders, Matt Breida, Corey Davis, and Darren Fells, which I was hoping someone would guess.
We would have
you couldn't pick Darren
Fells.
Fells?
Both of our last round picks or something like that. So it's pretty good. Okay, so for the listener, let me read this list of names that I sent to you guys to prepare some 1 minute takes for. I had indicated that we're going to do 4 takes each, 1 minute for each of those players. But just so we know the player pool here, we have at quarterback Sam Darnold, Dak Prescott, Matthew Stafford, Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, Baker Mayfield. Running back, we have David Johnson, David Montgomery, Keyshawn Vaughn, Rashad Penny, Kerryon Johnson, James Conner. Wide receiver, Amari Cooper, Kenny Galladay, Juju Smith-Schuster, Corey Davis, John Ross, James Washington. And at tight end, TJ Hawkinson, Darren Waller, David Njoku, Gerald Everett, Blake Jarwin, and Dallas Goedert. So if you'll notice, I tried to pick some Cowboys, some Steelers, and some Lions, hoping that you would all make it. Unfortunately, we'll pour one out for Mitch, and we'll move on here. Okay, so now that we know the player pool, and since JB won but deferred, we will have Dan make his first selection for who he would like to make a supportive 1 minute take for.
I love you, JB. I owe you a Truly's for deferring because I would have just throw the penalty flag and quit if I didn't get Dak Prescott. Right there, boys. The stars are aligned there. Here's a guy who is just really coming into his own. Everything line. He's got the O-line. He's got the best wide receiver.
We're gonna pause you there though because we're not gonna do the takes yet. We're gonna do the full draft first. I know you're excited. I know you're chomping at the bit, but we're gonna do the draft first.
No, throw the flag. That's worth at least a red flag.
All right, so JB, let's kick it over to you for the second and third selections.
All right, so keeping it with quarterbacks, I will take Matthew Stafford. For running backs, I will take David Montgomery for my second selection.
Okay. Back to you, Dan. And before you jump in with your take, we're just going to select 2 in a row.
I feel like I got slapped on the wrist here.
That's right. All right, so two picks for you. Then we'll go back to JB.
Amari Cooper. This draft is good. I don't need any other players. I'm really good right now. Pick number 3, I'll go James Conner. Give me my running back.
Love it.
Okay.
Dan, you were beyond predictable. Like I said, I will defer to you. I knew you were taking Dak, James Conner, Amari Cooper. We're both going to go into this with a quarterback wide receiver stack. I'm going to take Kenny Galladay with my third pick. And then I have to go with my man. And we saw the hype piece from Coach Gruden earlier today circulating. Mr. Darren Waller will be my tight end.
All right. And Dan, finish us off.
I'm a little depressed. He took Darren Waller on me.
Had at least one snipe. That's good.
We're Dynasty. I'll go with TJ Hawkinson in honor of Mitch here tonight.
He worked out with another tight end that's really big and strong, so he's really good now.
Indeed. All right, so we have our lineups set there. So JB has Matthew Stafford, David Montgomery, Kenny Galladay, Darren Waller. Dan has Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, James Conner, and TJ Hawkinson. Okay, so of course, this is the Dynasty Self Help Podcast, and that would be far too simple if we played this exercise as I described it. So we're going to challenge you guys a bit more psychologically. So, as our exercise, you all will be instead arguing against the assets that you drafted. So, more specifically, you'll be presenting a 1 minute or less, depending on how hard this is for you, case for why that player is not a great dynasty asset going forward. For that reason, I have deemed this exercise for the Dynasty Theory fellas, Dynasty Beer Me, because this is likely going to be a challenge and you'll probably need a couple cold ones to get through it. All right. And since JB won and, he won this draft that didn't end up really helping him, I'll allow him to go second. So he wins something at least, gets a few extra seconds to prepare his arguments. And I'm going to have Dan go first. Dan, you can take your players in any order you want.
All his players at once, which are Dak Prescott at QB, Amari Cooper at wide receiver, James Conner at running back, and TJ Hawkinson at tight end.
Right. So we're going to do those individually, though. So you have a minute for each player, and we'll start. You'll do one of those players, and then we'll flip it over to JB. So so there may be some strategy to kind of preparing the one you feel least prepared to argue against here, and save them for the last. So. Dan, I'll have you choose, and when you're ready, I've got a little 1 minute timer that I'm going to pull up, and then Kyle and I will score after each round. So you'll go, JB will go. We'll score you guys on your takes against your players, and then we'll move forward from there.
Two things.
Yes.
Two things. One, I love this. I hate you guys, but I love this at the same time. Two, so we are just strictly making a case against the players we picked. That's it.
A case against the players you picked in Dynasty.
Maximum
so
1 minute. You don't have to fill it.
Yep. Absolutely. So do what you can. It's your score that's going to suffer if it pains you too much. All right. So Dan, when you're ready, please tell us who you're going to start with, and then I'll start the timer and I'll hold it up for you.
I'll start with the franchise here, Dak Prescott.
All right. I'm going to click start now.
All right. Actually, I have given this some thought, because if Dak has a bad season, there goes a lot of my dynasty teams. The reason against him that would concern me is, there has been some change in that interior line there. Okay. Travis Frederick, who's been their center for a long time, is gone. Left guard's really up in the air a little bit. Left tackle is a beast there, but we've had some injury history in the past few years. So that O-line, as much as I am confident about it, if things don't go the right way, it could break down. And then, hey, if Dak's running for his life, every once in a while Dak holds on to the ball too long, you always fear that injury. If CeeDee Lamb takes a little longer to develop, we all love CeeDee Lamb, but Randall Cobb was a rock last year. He was very solid. Then you lose Witten, who was just every quarterback security blanket. That could be a concern as well. So as much as the Stars feel aligned in Dallas, we always know the season don't go as we scripted it out. So there are some concerns.
All right, and that is time. All right, KB, who are we going to hear about first?
I'm going to start with Matthew Stafford.
All right, your clock has begun.
Now, even though you guys fold us, and these are guys that I absolutely love, I don't want to lose to Dan. So I'm going to go through this here. Matthew Stafford, some things that concern me and should concern dynasty owners. There is recent injury history, and we know that, 32 years old, yeah, you might get that dynasty discount, but his perceived value in leagues, it's something that we need to be concerned with as an owner. And while he's in that the tough division there, Chicago and the Vikings, they still have, despite opt-outs, two very strong defenses. That's 4 divisional opponents. And then this is the team with Matt Patricia. They want to run the ball. They do. But with negative game scripts we've seen in the past, they haven't been able to do that. Now they have Kerryon Johnson, who was seen with a knee brace. They drafted DeAndre Swift, who is a superior talent that is going to be utilized. They're going to be able to run the ball. Don't expect that offense to have to throw the ball almost 600 times here in 2020. And because of that, I'm out, kind of.
Right at the buzzer. Excellent. All right. Kyle, have you written your scores down for these?
I have.
Okay.
What is my scoring system so I can write it again?
1 to 10, sorry.
Okay.
Or 0 to 10. It's possible to get a 0. Okay, so I've written mine down, and I'll say it after you give yours.
Okay, I have given Dan's take on Dak Prescott, a 9 out of 10. I think that all of his legitimate takes there are valid concerns for a great quarterback. And I have given JB 7 out of 10. Both were very strong cases presented for very strong quarterbacks that have potentials to be great. I just feel like the intricacies that Dan presented were slightly better and more fitting to the situation.
All right. And then my scores, I gave Dan a 7. I think my drawback with Dan's responses were that he focused a lot outside of Dak, not a whole lot of Dak himself, a lot about the offense, a lot about the O-line, a lot about the weapons. And I gave JB an 8. I liked how he mentioned the injury history. I liked the interdivision or within division analysis there, and so I gave him a small boost. All right, so
a close one.
It is a close one, and not in alignment with each other. So we'll keep this going into round 2. We will do snake with this as well. So JB, you'll be up once again, and let us know who you're going to select, and I'll get the timer going.
We'll just keep going in order. I'm going to go David Montgomery.
Okay. Timer has started.
Now, while David Montgomery, he is going to get the volume, we know he's not going to be utilized in the passing game as much as the other running backs that are going around him in dynasty startups. But also, he's coming off of one of the most inefficient seasons that we've seen in recent years. And I don't expect that to get any better. That offensive line, there's still a big concern there. We know Tariq Cohen's going to take a lot of the passing down work. And David Montgomery, his volume, while it is there, he's going to be, I think you can look at him as almost a poor man's Josh Jacobs or Derrick Henry. Not much involvement in the passing game. His value is going to be predicated on the fact of his touchdown upside. And can the Chicago Bears team move the ball down the field like the Raiders did last year or the Titans did last year as well? So for me, I just don't think David Montgomery moving forward, he's going to be a valuable dynasty asset. I do think they look to target another running back in 2021.
All right. Right at the buzzer again. All right, Dan, your turn. Who is our next, or who is your round 2 player that you're going to talk about? Dan, we can't hear you.
Ooh. We got you now.
Blow for blow with JB here, man. I'm going to stay at the running back position. Connor Strong.
All right. Here we go.
What I'm worried about is Connor is not strong. I am going to learn from round 1 in Jeremy, and I'm going to focus on the player and the team. Health is a concern. He has not been healthy in a long time. Is that body meant for bodybuilding and not football? We've seen how big he was on Instagram. And then the team around him. There is so many concerns at every level of that team. You got Big Ben aging and an injury concern. You got an O-line that lost Coach Munchak, and it hasn't quite been the same. Their top receiver, Juju, coming off an injury. You got Ebron, who can't catch the ball. They have concerns at every layer of that offense. What if the Pittsburgh Steelers are declining and Coach Tomlin finally goes on the hot seat here, guys? There's just too many questions. That offense could fall apart. Plus, they play the Ravens defense twice. That is not a tough division there. It's a brutal division, a physical division, which, again, adds to Connor's health concerns and the potential Pittsburgh Steelers struggles. So a lot of concerns and a lot of risk. We've seen it all on Twitter. Everyone's concerned about his health and James Conner this year.
Dan didn't want to bring up the strong defense that's going to keep them in every game with possibly positive game scripts where they run James Conner into the ground in the last year of his contract. It's crazy you failed to mention that.
This is not part of the contest, JB.
There are no rebuttals. Yes. Okay, Kyle, again, I have written down my scores, and I will toss it over to you before I reveal them.
All right, so I have, starting with JB, an 8. I thought that was a really well-documented description of David Montgomery. Everything was pretty accurate. There's a couple of things that I thought were feeling-based. So instead of being information-based or accuracy-based, they were more I think or I feel or, we all know he's not going to catch as many passes. So I docked a point or 2 for that. But otherwise, pretty much perfect. I've got an 8 for that. The James Conner take was right on for if you're going to make an argument against a great football player, you've got to do it. and this was done well. It brought in the entire team, as well as the player, as well as the division, as well as what's going on. But not perfect. It's a 9, but it's still a solid take.
All right. So an 8 and a 9. I will stick with JB first as well. I had a 7 for JB with a little too much emphasis just on Tariq Cohen. There was a lot of Tariq Cohen talk. He did get a +1 up to an 8 for another JB backaway. And if you're scoring at home, that is now 3 times. Actually earned a point during Dan's argument, which is, pretty unheard of, in our first time playing this game. So we'll score that as an 8 as well to match Kyle's. Now Dan hit it really right on. He took the feedback from the very first round. I loved the depth of it, loved the thinking on his feet. He gets a 9. But then he gets a -1 for a little bit of bias creeping in with Eric Ebron just being bad. I'm all for the honesty, but there's some bias creeping in there. So leveling at 8s there is the takeaway here.
All right, we got a tie in that round.
I'm mad I forgot Anthony McFarland.
Had a chance. Okay, round 3. Dan, you're back up. And once you select your player, I assume it might be Mr. Amari Cooper if you're going down the line.
Rip my heart out here and make me try to say anything negative about Amari Cooper. John knows this is torture for me right now.
All right. Ready when you are.
I'm ready.
Okay.
So the case here against Amari Cooper, first and foremost, we watched at the end of last year, he was limping for weeks. And we know there's this ongoing injury concern that is in the back of my mind that is greatly concerning me in my Amari shares. So I am first and foremost worried about his health long-term in Dynasty. Second, the emergence of Michael Gallup. Everybody's comparing how close, and if not better, Michael Gallup can be. Then you get another franchise receiver in CD Lamb, Blake Jarwin's emergence. Is there enough targets to go around and make him a premier number 1 receiver? And then you got the Zeke factor. And then Tony Pollard in year 2 stepping up. There's a lot of touches there. Could Amari go from a wide receiver 1 to 2, maybe even a 3? I mentioned the O-line breakdowns earlier. What if Dak doesn't have as much time to throw there? That could be in trouble. Darius Slay signs with Philadelphia. Now they get another shutdown corner. Sometimes they say Amari has some trouble against shutdown corners. So between matchups, targets, and the O-line, there are some questions.
All right. JB.
Oh, that was painful.
Really quick, I have 2 takeaways here on this whole thing. One, I think Dan needs to pick players and target them in dynasty leagues that aren't so easy to bash and make a case against. And that's the reason that you're up on me in this contest. And I'm all riled up here. But I'm going to go, and this is, I might even take a 0 here, but no, I'll present a case for Kenny Golladay. Or against Kenny Golladay.
It should be easy.
Couldn't even say against. He said for Kenny Golladay. All right. Clock has started.
We look at Kenny Golladay and you have this premier athlete, but then you have a counterpart in that wide receiving core, Marvin Jones. When he's healthy, he's almost right there with Kenny Golladay on a per game basis. And then, like I said, talking about Matthew Stafford, we're going to see this running game get more utilized because they're going to be able to rely on them as opposed to the injury from Kerryon Johnson that we saw last year and relying on Bo Scarborough, Ty Johnson. There are going to be other options in this offense. And then, I do think Dan's going to bring up TJ Hawkinson later. That's somebody that is going to develop in year 2, which we don't often see a young tight end coming in year 1 that's going to present an option, but he is going to demand a higher target share. And I do think that DeAndre Swift is going to, scratch that. I know DeAndre Swift is going to be more utilized in the passing game than we saw the rubbish last year.
All right. Let me just...
I like how you slid in the Hawkinson thing to try to win points on the next round there. Very slick, JB. That doesn't fly on Dynasty Self Help.
These tight ends, they develop from year 1 to year 2, and more so in year 3. Wait, can I have like just 2 seconds? Can I please have a bonus 2 seconds?
You can have a bonus 2 seconds, but they don't count.
That's right.
And he's on the last year of his deal. Where is he going to be in 2021?
That's dirty, John.
You missed that one. That was a huge one.
I did
Took some points off that one.
I know.
Regular time.
Kyle?
All right, I will start with JB. I've given him a 6 on this one. It was a good argument, but he missed a few key major points, one of which he just said right there at the end, which is his contract status. And you've tied that in with Matthew Stafford's contract status and whether Matthew Stafford is going to be their player of the future. They've got him a little bit, but, if those two are going to be both high-dollar players, they may choose to shut that whole thing down. So as a dynasty player, you never want to take your second contract somewhere else and still perceive that value. It just tends to drop you a little bit. So, yeah, I've given a 6 there. This was Dan's weakest argument, I would say. So Amari Cooper, there were some negatives that weren't mentioned here that as much as I love Amari Cooper, we didn't even mention the lack of competitiveness, right? That's the one that everybody loves to hammer on. The bias, the narrative that we hear is that because he's quiet and not outspoken, we didn't even mention. Well, and on fourth down play, he's on the sidelines, but other wide receivers are. There's that
Dan has
real
thrown the challenge
world.
flag.
All right, there's that real world narrative that's out there that isn't true. But that was what, that's a creme de la creme, cherry on top of the cake. That was just missed.
That's the clapper's fault, Kyle. That's the clapper's fault.
And Dan also did not mention the out in that contract after 2021.
It's true.
Yeah, it looks like a longer term deal, but Amari, just like Kenny, he could be moving on as well. And that's something that I think Dan really should have brought up.
If Gallup outperforms, you can keep Gallup and not Amari. You've got that same choice. So, yep. I bashed you a little bit on this one, Dan. I gave you a 5.
Oh, that's harsh. That's harsh. That's worse than my Spanish teacher in high school.
So, Kyle, that was a 6 for JB and a 5 for Dan.
That's correct.
Okay. So my scores, I'll start with JB as well. So overall argument, I gave an 8. Thought it was a well done argument. It was there. A lot of adjustments though through the calculations here. So we have -1 point for excuses beforehand. We also have a -1 point for right at the end. And I think, and then he altered it to, and I know, which we know that we don't know anything in this. So if that's the one thing we do know.
No, as I said earlier, I know everything, and there's no place for humility in fantasy football. I said that.
I'll throw you out of there if you argue these. And then also one more -1, even after the fact, with a requested bonus 2 seconds, which is, thinking of this game, just unheard of to think that you need, 62 seconds to make your argument. So that results in 5 points from my end, 11 points in the round total. I'm just updating my standings, and I'll give the standings before the final round.
I'm giving Jeremy my penalty flag, John. He killed you.
He did.
Well, Dan, now it's your turn. So your argument, I gave a 6. So right on with, or a little bit lower than JB started with, but we also have some adjustments here. We have a +1 bonus for starting with Amari Cooper's injury history, which I know was painful for you to say, but sticking with the player again, thinking back about what you learned in round 1. And then we have a -1 for reverting to your old tendencies and focusing back on the teammates. So you lost that point. So you're back at 6. I gave you a +1 for saying something bad about Amari Cooper, which I knew was going to be tough for you. And then I deducted that point as well for saying something bad about my boy Amari Cooper. So you ended up right where you started at 6 points. And that's an 11-point round for you as well.
This is like flashbacks of a old relationship that was unhealthy, Jeremy. You're killing me here.
Hey, I'm breaking it down very in depth here. Okay, so headed into our 4th and final round. We have Dan in the lead with 44 points. JB closely behind with 42 points.
It's tight.
This will again be 0 to 10. And I believe it is Dan to round us out first and JB to close us out. So, and I believe you're going to be talking to us about
TJ Hawkinson.
TJ Hawkinson, yes. All right. So when you are ready, I will start the clock.
I am ready.
Let's go for it.
All right. It starts with the dysfunctional Lions, third on my dysfunction rankings. 1 playoff win in 30 years. They hire a new coach every 3 years. There's no consistency, no continuity. So we start with the organization. Then you got a tight end who's only entering into year 2. We know it takes time for tight ends to develop. Not only is he only in year 2, but it's in a COVID year where he loses that off season. When Ross Tucker was on our podcast, says they are the guys I worry about too, not just the rookies, but those year 2 guys that are going into the year. This is wide receiver university here, gentlemen. Here you got Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, Danny Amendola, veteran wide receivers with a big rapport with Matthew Stafford on a COVID year. It is going to be money with those 3 wide receivers all year. Then you get Swift, who is going to catch more balls out of the backfield, along with Kerryon Johnson. Plus, you got Hawkinson's health. I did not forget that. Okay, Hawk just coming off an injury. There's too many things going against Hawkinson to produce in year 2, and that is a lot of conviction. Top that, JB.
Yeah, he asked you to top it.
I will try my best.
It. All right. So we're going to hear about Darren Waller. Oops. There you go.
As I mentioned previously, we saw that piece of coach speak come out. And we see this time and time again with these coaches, hyping up their players. And we get it. You're not going to talk bad about your players during the offseason. But Darren Waller, guys, he's a one-hit wonder. He had a fantastic 2019. Tyrell Williams was not healthy. We saw the emergence of Hunter Renfrow, who nobody was even talking about prior to the 2019 season. And that was his big target competition. Oh, and look, I can't forget Jalen Richard. But now you bring in these other players that are going to be competing with him for targets. Henry Ruggs, Brian Edwards. You bring in Lynn Bowden. And then also we talk about contracts all the time. Yes, Darren Waller got the contract extension, but there is 0 dead cap after 2020. Let's say Foster Moreau, he bounces back. You bring in Jason Witten, who, while he might not have a long-term impact, he's going to have a role here in 2020, and the time's up.
You were cautious to not go toward the 62 seconds there. You were right at the end. All right, Kyle, if you are ready, you can go, but I need just a second to
all right, I thought
my notes here.
I'm going to go ahead and say it right
these
here.
Guys get style points for the way they closed out. So both of them on the money, like all
Right.
4 rounds. Just got to say, on the money, on the timing, and then just the out cue on both of those was money.
Right.
So.
Professionals. They're professionals.
Gracias.
I have to say,
Okay, I got you. Yep.
these 2 guys presented their best arguments last, and I can never give a full 10 points to anyone because I feel like there is always the search for perfection and not the achieve goal of perfection. But I'm giving both of them a 9. This is fantastic. I thought they were both very well presented arguments. If there has to be a tiebreaker because of whatever your scoring happens to be, Jeremy, I'm going to give a +0.5 for taunting while on the clock for Dan at the end, saying with 2 seconds left, talking trash to JB before his clock was run. I thought that was just poetic. Loved it. So, yes, if there has to be a tiebreaker, that's your tiebreaker.
Right there with you.
I love it. All right, so a 9, both 9s with a lingering 0.5 there that
Yes.
will be awarded if needed.
Both very well argued at that time. That was immaculate.
Indeed. All right. Why don't I start with I'll start with Dan since he went first. So I started him out with an 8. It was a very solid argument, a lot of detail, loved it. But of course, as we know, the Russian judge has to make some adjustments here. Started with his dysfunction rankings, which I'm not privy to, but I appreciated that there are dysfunction rankings. So it started with a -1 and then was wiped out internally to remain even at 8, because I'd like to see those rankings a little bit more in depth before I make any conclusions about that. We had our first COVID reference, which was great, a +1 there, up to 9. And then one more, a -1 actually after that for the wide receiver U in the pros. I think Clemson has that designation. I think it's tough to argue that. And so I don't know, while the Detroit Lions at times can be considered a college football franchise based on their history, I think we'll reserve that for Clemson. And so all that movement results in his 8 that he stayed with, or that he started with. So now, the deciding factor, you come down to JB. I'm going to describe his before I give the score. So there were a few phrases that I'm not keen on, like one-hit wonder, a little bit of, as the Raiders tend to do, they draw out the teammate analysis, which I know that we've talked about, but I think there are very valid concerns. I think if there's one person that is really set up in this game to line up well with some criticism, it would be Darren Waller. We've only seen it once. All that pulling together, I ended up with a 9 on JB, which means that Dan is the winner by 1 point overall. He doesn't even need his extra half point, but a well-contested match at the end. I didn't know what Kyle was going to do, but I didn't feel that JB's final argument was 2 points ahead of Dan's there. So, Dan, I'll give you your time to give your victory speech, and if JB has any rebuttal to that, we'll allow his rebuttal now.
You should give him 1 minute to make a victory speech, and then give JB 10 seconds to rebut.
Deal. Go ahead, Dan.
I think JB could have lost another point there. That you guys didn't mention that all these other guys getting targets are all rookies here. So Waller's the veteran on that team, but he could have got a point there for the Witten comment. I think anytime you mention the GOAT, he gets a point, but it's an absolute honor, and I will be humbly bragging about this Dynasty Self Help Championship victory over JB on our next Dynasty Theory podcast and every other opportunity I get. Again, humbly bragging.
Right.
Thank you guys for the honor tonight. That was a lot of fun. Something I didn't expect there. And JB, always a pleasure, buddy. Always a pleasure.
the inaugural Dynasty Beer Me champion.
If you could guys edit that clip with me beating JB by a point, I'd be happy to retweet that as often as you guys would like. Just saying.
Set it up for daily. So. JB, any response?
Well, first of all, this was a lot of fun, and I want all of your listeners to know that we now all of a sudden have an opening on the Dynasty Theory Fantasy Football Show. And it is unrelated to what just took place. I want to make myself very clear. But no, I do think I want to make it very clear. I picked those guys that I did because it was very difficult for me to come up with anything. And I think at times that really showed. I was grasping at straws, anything I could. I tried to come in with the power phrases. Oh, he's a one-hit wonder. I love Darren Waller, and I actually think he's going to be an absolute stud moving forward because he is going to provide that stability. But even Matthew Stafford, David Montgomery, Kenny Golladay, and the guys that Dan, I know that hurt him to make a case against them. So Dan deserves the win strictly because he had to talk some negativity around Dak Prescott and Amari Cooper. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like I said, it was dirty. I'm not thrilled the switcheroo that you guys pulled, but this was an absolute blast. I'm looking at the clock here. Hell, we've been on for almost 2 hours, and it feels like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I didn't expect that. It feels like 10 minutes. And JB, you just went over your 10 seconds again, so that's another minus one. And, on the air here tonight, I just want to say I will be happy to have a side bet. Waller, you're crushing me at tight end, but I think Dak, Connor, and Cooper will score enough to overcome that, and we'll win a little side bet at the end of the year. And this is the Dynasty Self Help Trophy, John, that I'm holding in my hands here. You can't read it, but that's what it says. He's not even paying attention now. Dynasty Self Help Trophy, John. It says Dan 1, John 0. All right.
That's fine. And I'm going to tell you exactly where you can put that trophy, but we'll talk about that off the air.
Touche.
Yeah. So you guys did mention the time. I had built in here at the very end since you guys did put in some time off air into these takes pro these players. I was going to give you time to give a 1-minute spiel or even less about those players, but we'll encourage our listeners to check out Dynasty Theory for those takes. I'm sure you guys talk about those players plenty on your podcast. And I really appreciate you guys, playing along with this exercise, even though it wasn't what you were prepared for. It probably wasn't the most comfortable thing. It was probably pretty difficult, but, I think that this can be a beneficial exercise for all of us that have takes, that all of us that have opinions toward in favor of players, because we spend so much time building up those takes for the players that, we may not spend a whole lot of time, figuring out unbiased reasons why we'd be against those players, and, looking at the data and trying to see how it doesn't fit our case. And so it's really healthy for us to do that. And, sometimes the evidence, if we have, a lack of evidence to possibly show how we feel about these players or against these players, might reveal a blind spot or even a bias. So I really do appreciate you guys bearing with us for the exercise and doing your best with it. It was a lot of fun.
This was a blast. Kyle, Jeremy, Rich, you guys got a gem here in this podcast. And I think anything I know just personally I do in life, when you get taken out of your comfort zone, it makes you better. And tonight you did that, and we did it with fun, and kudos to you guys. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, and as we wrap up here, I want to make two observations, or an observation and a comment, and then we'll kind of wrap here. I'll throw it over to Kyle to kind of take us away. But one thing that Dan said earlier was that he had a bit of a reservation about hot takes, and making hot takes himself, and was more of the sponge. And as a therapist, I just kind of let that marinate. Let myself process it a little bit. We have kind of channels as a therapist at times, where we have 3 channels. We have a channel 1, which is basically what the client themselves says. Channel 2, what the behavior shows. And then channel 3 is my reaction. And so, Dan was pretty straightforward about, not being being the one that makes the hot takes and kind of putting that on JB. And, I haven't seen a ton of hot takes from Dan. And so, that behavior aligns. But my reaction is, it sounds like Dan might be a little scared to make that take. And I want to challenge him to go out of his comfort zone, try one on for size. And, off the top of your head here, Dan, why don't you give us the take for either 2020 or just a Dynasty hot take? First thing that comes to your mind, because in therapy, we always get the I don't know response, or, I can't think of anything, as a common psychological defense. But really what happens after that is the thing that comes to our head at first is really something that ends up being pretty important. So let's hear what you got.
I do have, a couple stored away, and, you go on the podcast and someone's going to ask, and I try not to be a homer and give you the Cowboys hot takes. So as I said, last year was Mark Andrews, DJ Shark. I have one this year that's just resonate with me. And for me this year, it's Marquise Hollywood Brown. I truly believe he is going to be a true number 1 receiver in Baltimore. I think Lamar Jackson's going to progress. I think people are going to make some adjustments to the Ravens, and you're going to see them open up a little bit more in the passing game as they evolve there. He's healthy. He's had a strong offseason. He works out with some very talented receivers. Psychology aside, he works out with Antonio Brown, who's his cousin, who's the great, just a great, talented football player. So to me, I think he's going to make a big jump, and he may not have 100 catches, but I think he's going to make up for that in yards per catch, big plays, touchdowns. And I expect a spectacular year for Hollywood.
JB, rate Dan's take.
2.
He's just mad.
No, and I hear Dan's take. Hollywood Brown is somebody he's planted his flag on all off season. So if he does hit, I'm going to give all the props in the world because he was completely right about Mark Andrews, DJ Shark. I can attest to all of the dynasty leagues we're in together. He has those two across his dynasty portfolio. But I don't know if the passing volume is going to be there. What's Hollywood Brown's ceiling? I'm gonna say a wide receiver 3, nothing better.
I disagree. Jeremy told me to have some conviction with my hot take here. And I just think there's no one else other than Mark Andrews that could really step up and take a jump in that passing game. So I expect him to stay healthy. He put on some muscle this offseason. It's just another one that my gut says the stars are aligned. And just watching film, he's just explosive.
You just watch Marquise Brown, man. I mean, he made CeeDee Lamb not be a household name until Marquise Brown wasn't there. So you got to look at those kind of things. I mean, Marquise Brown was good enough to create a shadow, for CeeDee Lamb.
I like that. Make me feel even better.
And
Sooner.
And Kyle has mentioned the Oklahoma Sooners too many times to count tonight, so we know he is completely unbiased.
Right.
And with that, I'm going to wrap us up here. Thank you guys again so much for coming on, taking your time out, taking a longer episode. That's what we typically do here, is a nice long one for the listener. Just, kind of break up the 30 minute to an hour episode that, goes into some in-depth analysis on specific players and specific projections. We open it up here and go through all the ins and outs of what's going on inside your guys' brains. So thanks again for jumping through those psychological hoops with us. Tell us again where to find you guys, and then we'll wrap from there.
Yeah, again, this was so much fun. Thank you for having us on. You can find me on Twitter at the Bauer Club, and then follow the show Dynasty Theory at Dynasty Theory FF on both Twitter and Instagram. And then Jeremy, like you mentioned, Mitch and I, we are kicking off a brand new project, and that's going to be Fantasy Football Confidential. It's going to be much wider range of topics, and it's going to be something completely different from Dynasty Theory. Ideally, I want a little overlap between the two, but then I also want to have real conversations, and it's still very fantasy football focused, but there's conversations. And Dan, we kind of brought it up on Dynasty Theory this week with the Darius Geis situation. There's things that I think, even though it might be, it's certainly bigger than fantasy football, that are uncomfortable to talk about. And that's something that I kind of want to push on that show as well, but still fantasy football being the focus there. But yeah, so you can find that. I just made the Twitter handle, so I think it's at FF_confidential. And we're being joined by Troy and Linda, who are going to be making their podcast hosting debut. So Mitch and I are very excited to work with them. We're really looking forward to it.
And over here, FF Coach Dan on Twitter. Give me a follow. Appreciate it. John plugged all the Dynasty Theory content there. It's a pleasure working with JB and Mitch. Every Monday night will probably be Tuesday nights during the football season.
Yep.
And then my passion for Dynasty carries over to DFS. I'm probably a couple weeks away from debuting with Justin from the Father Son Pod. And I'll say it here for the first time, our DFS podcast is going to be In the Money. So look out for In the Money in a couple weeks.
And even though I give Dan a hard time constantly, if you're going to listen to DFS advice, Dan, he's going to be humble, I think, much more humble than I would be. But he has a very good track record financially in what he's been able to bring in through DFS. So I have to give him a shout out there.
You're not a bad guy after all, JB. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Except Dan gets a -1 for having Justin as his co-host.
I accept that.
We love Justin. We had him on an episode a while back, and that guy's awesome. I think you two are going to make a tag team spectacular for DFS. I am not very good at DFS, so I very much look forward to listening to that and getting some hints on how I can enjoy that a little more. So I appreciate that.
Appreciate it, man.
And then the third member of Dynasty Theory, Mitch at DynoMC. Follow him for Game of Thrones and League of Legends takes with an AE.
And then really quick for Mitch, the brainchild behind the projections that we put together, that's something that Mitch really wanted to roll out, and he was pushing. And I can't tell you how many hours he put into it. and it's a lot of information, but it's information that he put in a tremendous amount of time. So just like I gave Dan the shout out, I have to commend Mitch on that.
Absolutely. And, unfortunately, Keyshawn Vaughn was only brought up by me and not mentioned. And so I think that there are still some repressed feelings. Okay, Kyle brought him up, but we didn't hear it out of the mouths of Dynasty Theory. And, that seems like a shame. And so there's certainly some repressed feelings, some avoidance there that we'll have to uncover in a future episode of the Dynasty Self Help Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Dynasty Self Help. Follow our fabulous producer, Rich, at Streaming Rich. My boomer co-host, Kyle, at Dogleg Brewer. And I'm at Jared Schwob. We will see you next time.